My name is Johannes Niederhauser, and I'm going to introduce my new book project here. It will be the first book that I will self-publish or that I will publish through my Halcyon publication. I've started now more than 3 years ago an alternative to the current academic system with my Halcyon Guild, links to which you find in the description of this video. And I will now here briefly introduce my next book, which will be on Wilhelm von Humboldt's ideal of the university. And if you want to ask a question tonight, if you're live here with me, I will answer questions that are coming as a super chat. And if you know anyone who's interested in the university, the future of education, you can feel free to share the video with them. So as I just said, if you want to ask a question, you can ask a super chat question. I'll read them out and I will try and answer them. Maybe just briefly by way of introduction, I wrote a PhD on Martin Heidegger, to be precise, on the phenomenon of death in the entirety of Heidegger's philosophy. The book was published a few years ago by Springer, about 2 years ago. And since 2020, I've been building the Halcyon Guild and Academy, where we offer philosophy courses to the general public to find ways to circumvent the gatekeepers. So the reason, and many years ago, while I was still a PhD student, I wrote a paper on, which was published in the, I think, International Yearbook of Hermeneutics, on otium cum dignitate, leisure with dignity. It is in otium, in leisure, that we can retain our human dignity. I think especially in our epoch, this will continue to remain a crucial question. So in the research for this paper, and also included in the end of this paper, is a short chapter also on Wilhelm von Humboldt's university ideal, because he envisioned the university as a place of otium cum dignitate. And I will go as far as saying that Humboldt's ideal of the university has not yet been actualized, and it is upon us to actualize it in the coming centuries. Because I think that Humboldt stands at the very beginning of an epoch of which we are also just early children. And I also am not in favor of the endless lamenting and critique and meta critiques of the university, of education, etc., etc. They're pointless. It's endless. It goes absolutely nowhere. It's often cynical. So I think the time or the age of critique or critical theory is completely over. It was a containment strategy from the beginning. Anyways, so that is not the concern here either. The book. So if you'd like to get on the mailing list from the book for the book, just follow the link, the first link in the description of this video. And I should also mention that the work here on this channel is completely funded by people who sign up to my courses. So there will be a link to the Halcyon Teachable platform where you can sign up to one of my courses. And of course, also by the people who support me on Patreon and through PayPal, etc. All of this in the description of this video. And I'm very grateful if you could support me, or if you leave a super chat here, that would be great also. So I think, as I said, the time for critique is over. So this book is not a critique of the current university, but it is not a purely historical work either. So I don't just look at Humboldt's ideas and how quaint they were and aren't they very cute, but I think, as I said before, that Humboldt stands at the beginning, not just Humboldt, of course, also Herder and Kant and this entire German movement of the epoch through which we now live, in this early moment of it. And I think what we usually refer to as the Enlightenment only is an there's so much been said about the negative dialectics of the Enlightenment, etc. So none of this interests me. I think it's all just baseless, endless critique that doesn't get to the heart of what really occurred at that time, and hence this is what ultimately I am after, is to understand why, for example, Humboldt and others like Herder turned to history, what has been now called historicism, and why there was this intense interest and search for the origin also at that time. So the video also, I have to say, there's a video lecture on my channel which is on Humboldt's university ideal, and it's one of the, surprisingly, it became over the years one of the most successful videos, and the comments indicated that the people commenting who mentioned they had never heard anything like this about what education could be. And some of them were, as they themselves mentioned, quite old. And that to me was striking, because Humboldt's ideal is the ideal that I grew up with in Germany. That's the ideal of the Humanistisches Gymnasium that I went to. It is also the ideal of the Liceo Classico, for example, in Italy and other places around Europe. But to me, it's striking that it has been obviously dying, and it is in need of a rejuvenation or a continuation. And it is also in need of this on the now planetary scale on which we live, and this new weird world of which we are trying to make sense of. So I go through in the book through Humboldt's understanding of language. I bring in some of Herder's ideas as well. I go into his understanding of history, and I go into his understanding of cosmos and the university. And from there on out, I'm developing his notion of the ideal university further. So the idea is to see his suggestions for a future university as now being, for there to be a possibility that this can now slowly only now be actualized. And I think that Humboldt wrote what he wrote on the university. Much of this, by the way, was never intended to be published. These were white papers written during his time as a bureaucrat for the Prussian government. So those were official papers for internal use when he was in charge of the educational system of Prussia. And there are some quite, really striking remarks in there. I'm going to read you one now, which will also be in the book. The insight into, so this is from the Litauische Schulplan. And this is my translation: the insight into pure Wissenschaft, science, which only the human being can find within himself, is reserved to the university. In order for this self-actus, the self-act, to take place in a most authentic sense, both freedom and healthful loneliness are necessary. And from these two aspects, the entire formal organization of universities arises. Taking seminars is a minor matter. What is essential, however, is the community of like-minded peers and the consciousness that at the same place there is a significant amount of already fully educated and formed vollendet Gebildeter, who do nothing but dedicate themselves to the enhancement and propagation of science. And science, of course, includes metaphysics, theology, and the ancient languages. We're not talking about the hard, so-called natural sciences, which have lost all touch with nature. I'd like to read you another quote from Humboldt and what he feared would be what is on the horizon in our age. For example, Humboldt saw that if we are not exposed to a manifoldness of situations, as he calls it, then we will develop to a lesser degree. So the notion of cosmopolitanism is extremely important. We have to understand this correctly, not in this bizarre, extremely superficial way that it is propagated today, where I think it's mostly about food, apparently. The true purpose of the human being, writes Humboldt, is the highest and most proportionate Bildung, formation, of his or her forces to a unified whole. And another quote from Humboldt, the more the human being is active for himself, the more he will form himself. Sich bilden. Now, I think what Humboldt saw on the horizon, given that he was in government, and the burgeoning bureaucratic state to him, I think, was terrifying. He foresaw that there could be a misunderstanding of what humanity means, of what it means to be human, and that the human being becomes reduced to a machine. Or actually, the bureaucrat, in an expressed sense, wants to turn humans into machines. So I see in Humboldt's notion of an ideal university a potential, precisely also in the way in which he describes the university, as essentially a community of like-minded peers, and the consciousness that at the same place, I'm just reading from Humboldt again, there's a significant amount of already fully educated, informed people who do nothing but dedicate themselves to the enhancement and propagation of science. So I see in this access points for us to pull out potentials that can be actualized and fulfilled precisely, which may not even have been possible to fulfill or to actualize at the time of Humboldt, precisely because of the workings and the operations of the uncanny wheelwork that is the bureaucratic state, which I'm not suggesting is in any way winding down, but which can be circumvented through the rhizomatic techniques of the internet, which of course I don't think it should stay purely on the internet, but we're using this as a distribution system to actualize that possibility of a university, which is what? The place in which the one and the many come together within you, actualizing the cosmic law. And also the focus of Humboldt is not in an afterlife. Sort of, one of the big races, obviously, right now is for a new religion. And one of the new Ersatzreligionen, one of the new ersatz religions is transhumanism, which is neo-Christianity and nothing else. The transhumanism propagated by Ray Kurzweil, who is employed by Google, is neo-Christianity. It's a theory of salvation that promises you an afterlife. And there are other mind traps out there, senselessness that masks itself as sense making, or senselessness that masks itself as a surrogate of sense. But there's always sort of the promise of something other to come. But instead, when we consider the cosmos, then we are in the here and now. We have to take seriously what is the here and now and try and also understand again the cosmos as a continuum, of which so we can see where the university finds its place within this. And hence, this is my idea and suggestion for the book, because Humboldt envisions the university as the place for the human being to actualize the truth of the cosmos, of beautiful and true order. And this is not dreamy romanticism. This is not anything that we should simply disregard as impossible and be cynical about, simply because the universities as they are now are incapable of providing this. Good that they're incapable of it. All the better, because it shows the limitations of this old age, of which Humboldt is not a part, I think, and others of this time aren't either. I think he goes well beyond what we would officially think of his time. And as I said before, I don't think we've barely understood what the Enlightenment truly still holds for us. And I don't mean the cult of reason or anything of that sort, but we have to consider the fact that here is a movement that, in hindsight, as it bursts out, begins to see itself as Aufklärung, as a clearing up of the sky, mind you. And I don't mean any of the tropes of the Dark Ages were dark, etc. But something begins to rupture and to shift. And insofar as we remain stuck in in either utopian or dystopian visions of the afterlife, which is a posited future, and I don't just mean in a Christian afterlife. Communism is an obvious example of this. Full communism is an afterlife phantasma and nothing else. Those are positive potentials that cannot be actualized. Hence, they begin to haunt us. Hence, the future withdraws. Thus, we live in the post-X age. And critique is dead. It has no place. It has no purpose. And I mean, specifically, I don't mean Kantian critique. I mean the endless critique. Don't you think it's quite strange, to make it a bit more colloquial, that the predominant critiques of so-called neoliberalism, of this specter of neoliberalism, comes from inside the university? It probably should tell us something. It probably should tell us something also, that the university produces its best critics. So none of this is my concern. Instead, my concern is to understand our epoch through the shift that occurs, that we now so benignly call the movement of historicism, and at the same time to see how, for example, through Humboldt, there is a genuine possibility to move beyond this strange twilight or limbo of the post-X age. So this will be what the book addresses through the lens and through the vision of Humboldt, which I think goes well beyond his time, and precisely because he does understand that the university must become that place where the human being remains human, or can become human, in the age of machine. And to be machine-like, you don't need machines. To be machine-like in the age of machine, we don't need ChatGPT or anything else to become automated, automata. Goethe understands language as mostly automated. So did Osip Mandelstam, who thought that everyday speech is for the most part automatic. He said that 100 years ago. And it is only in poetry that language, or that the word, is freed again. Now, I will. So it goes beyond also this. There's a bit of a. I will compare in the book actually some notions of Darwinism and the understanding of language in Darwinism and in Herder and in Humboldt and others to show again another alternative to how we usually understand history and evolution or evolvement or unfolding. So if you're new here, because there's always people coming in and out, if you have questions, I'm happy to take a super chat answer question. But if you do want to just sign up for the book for when it's out, let me just put this here. You just follow this link here and type in your email address, scroll down a bit, and once the book's done and once I publish it, I will self-publish this one. It's the first time I publish one of my artworks myself, and because I want to be free in what I say, not have anyone interfere with it. There will come a day, perhaps, when I read out some of the reviews I got in earlier times, some of the really remarkably idiotic remarks you get when you try and publish something on Heidegger, or anyone else for that matter, which it's quite striking. But it's also, well, it's the same in any country. That's what's so bizarre about this ominous, anonymous peer review, where there is no peer at the other end, but just a silent killer. I mean, hence, I think Humboldt's university ideal has never been actualized, but is now waiting to be actualized, and is, I think, really necessary to be actualized, to be honest. And I think that we can, in the age of the internet, establish those places that he envisions more easily and more readily than at a university, at a proper place that seeks accreditation and hence approval from the state and from donors, etc. Can move more quickly and is more nimble. So thank you very much, Kevin. I see Kevin is here, and I see Kevin just Kevin. I'm not going to say your last name, but thanks for being here, Kevin, and thanks for showing up to the courses, etc. He's one of the good ones, and so maybe a word on this is something. If you're from America or not from Europe, maybe you've never heard of this. There's a lot of criticism, of course, of the American university system because American students are raped by their, and I'm sorry for the strong language, but that's simply what happens, by your ticket to the middle class is really quite expensive, isn't it? When I studied in America, I met people who had studied philosophy and sociology because it interested them sincerely. And after their bachelor's, they couldn't continue, so didn't do a master's, didn't do a PhD. So they ended up, and I don't mean this, and this is not snobbery or anything. They ended up, I mean, I don't, I'm not looking down upon any of this. I'm very sorry for them, and they ended up at Gap, or a bank to work as a teller to hand out money. This is about not more than 10 years ago, but still, I suppose it's gotten worse, and basically a student debt forgiveness, I don't think is a solution, because I think what that would create is, with any of these skewed markets, there's no free market. All markets are to some degree centrally planned, or at least the conditions are set essentially. It would probably just lead to more student loans being taken out, frankly. So that system is obviously quite dysfunctional, but it isn't any better in Europe. What the technocracy of the European Union has dreamt up is really quite remarkable. And also, you have to hand it to them in their cynicism. They do have a sense of humor. They went to Bologna, which is the place of what's usually considered the first university of the world. And in Bologna, it was decided that the European universities would be homogenized. You could also say there was a process of Gleichschaltung, if we want to be a bit facetious, but we don't have to be, of course. So in Bologna, and towards the end of the 90s, it was decided that all universities now have to adopt the Anglo-American model of offering bachelor degrees, master degrees, and PhDs, all in terms of strict programs where you get credit points for your study courses, for the modules that you take. Modules, not courses, sorry, modules. They don't call them courses anymore. That would imply there's a lecture. There are no lectures anymore. There are PowerPoint slides. So you basically go to high school now when you go to university. It used to be, this is even before my time, but this is what I've heard. You used to go to university, study philosophy for 5 years. Then you were able to write your final thesis and become a magister of philosophy, a master of philosophy. During that time, you were completely free to take any lecture that you wanted. Yes, you had to fulfill a few things. Obviously, you had to take exams, you had to write papers and essays, but you didn't just, focus on something for a short while and then never come back to it. So you didn't hunt for credit points in order to be able to get to the next year. It wasn't given to you. You were free and you had to decide what it is that you want to study. Also, by introducing the distinction between bachelor and master's degree, of course, what you do is you increase the output of university students with degrees in a lot faster. And that was the idea. For example, in Germany, there was no limit to how long you could study. There were people who studied for 20 years. And whatever their motivations were, why not? And of course it was about streamlining the university. Of course, in the path of that, the humanities get crowded out. So where's the idea of Europe if it isn't in the humanities? Can you just ground it in abstract, legalistic, technocratic systems? I don't think so. But well, in any event, they do show a certain sense of cynical sense of humor. And thank you very much. Thank you very much, Max. Yeah, that's good. So as I said, if there are any questions, only super chat questions will be answered. And also, if you want to know about the book, sign up via the link that I put in the chat, which is also in the description of the video. And it would be very good if you could support the work on the channel here by enrolling in a course or by subscribing on Patreon, by supporting through PayPal. All the links are in the description of this video, so that helps me keep the lights on and continuing this project, which I'm beginning to see more and more as, if you forgive me, the hubris, which I don't think it is a civilizational project. And it's only just now, if you go to my website, you can actually see this is something that I wrote years ago, but it's now becoming clearer and clearer to me that this is what I'm trying to engage in, to save from the wreckage what can still be saved, and well, and deliver it over to what is coming. So I think I'll leave it at that for now. If you know anyone who's interested in the future of higher education, send them this video. Maybe also send them the link to the book announcement. Once it's out, I'll make this public here, of course. I'll send out emails. I will publish this through Halcyon Publishing, and it will be available on the usual website, which I have to say, there's a lot of, again, critique of the so-called corporate state, but without that grand river, much of what has been published the past 10 years wouldn't have been published. And it has enriched our discourse, I think, greatly. So we have to make the best use of this our age. Because what's striking about the university, isn't it, is that it is ever more depressing and suppressing, only just, not even politically. That, of course, comes in as well. But also because of this intense suffocation of thinking through continuous mechanization and anonymization of any human interaction. And they are optimizing, universities are optimizing, and this is worldwide a process, for bureaucratic types to join them, who are mere opportunists, and they will continue to attract those. And I actually spoke to an acquaintance of mine who's a professor somewhere. He's about to retire. He's paid his dues. He's been very successful. If anyone wants to psychologize this, I can guarantee you this is someone who has no resentment, because he's seen enough suffering in his life and has shown a great response to that. He very directly and honestly said universities will not be the place where the truly creative people will go in the very near future, because universities are increasingly only optimizing for the bureaucratic types. And he sees this actually going forth in this to basically be the rule coming in this decade. But that, of course, that's terrifying on the other hand, because if you don't suddenly just, for some reason you enroll in philosophy, or at least philosophy, politics, and economics or so, and you step into a lecture on Nietzsche or Plato, and you've never even heard of the name, and all of a sudden you're exposed to these ideas and possible futures, of course, also. And to a large degree, this is where we also, of course, come in touch with our ancestry in the West. I mean, this is our heritage. And even the deconstructors are our heritage. The skeptics, they're not very good skeptics, but they're not honest skeptics. But the skeptic has his place. But anyway, so the obvious, terrifying aspect of this is if this breaks away, then that connection to the past also dies with it. And that is, to quote Tocqueville, from, let me find the quote so I don't butcher it completely, because I only have it in my mind in German. Since the day the past has ceased to throw its light on the future, the human spirit has been erring in darkness. That is the darkness that could set upon us. And that darkness must be averted. And this could happen under the brightest light of the greatest, formerly greatest universities. Even by reading Plato, it could happen, but it is read in such a way that nothing of it remains. That's another issue, perhaps. But yes, so anyone who's here, I shall retire now. But if you'd like to know when the book is out, sign up or submit the form in the link of this video. And if you can, please enroll in one of my courses or support the work here on Patreon, PayPal, etc. All the links are in the description of this video. And do share this video with anyone who is interested in the future of Bildung, of higher formation. Thank you very much indeed.